Hi, so today I want to look at some autosomal DNA evidence related to the Book of Mormon. Some people say they proclaim that there's no DNA evidence supporting the Book of Mormon. I've written a book called Face of the Nephite, and it looks at the DNA studies um, related to the Book of Mormon, and I look at the various types of DNA testing. In this video, I'm going to look at the autosomal DNA testing of Native Americans and how it relates to the Book of Mormon. And in doing this, I'll share um, portions from my book. What I'm going to do is share the screen. Okay. All right. Um, what you see there on the screen is a portion from the book that relates to the autosomal DNA testing. Now, what I should explain first that autosomal DNA testing is a type of DNA testing where they take sort of a they look at sort of the panorama across the DNA, and they look at various markers, and they connect those to population groups that have those types of markers. So what they can do with this testing is sort of get an idea of looking at these sample markers, the population groups that the the tested population likely relates to. And so um, when they have done this autosomal testing for Native Americans, a high percentage of the DNA type is an East Asian type, which sort of that part sort of fits the idea of a migration that came across the Bering land bridge and populated the Americas. So there is evidence that there was a migration that occurred there, but in addition, the autosomal DNA testing also shows a significant portion of DNA that does not relate to um, Asia, does not relate to East Asia, at least. And so, if you take a look at the the book here, again, so what they have here is they've used colors to sort of designate what the markers are pointing to, and so for example, you have orange for DNA markers that point to an African origin. You have a blue color that points to origins that can relate to the Middle East or from Europe, sort of this Caucasian type DNA, and then you have a pink which sort of points more specifically to Eastern Asia type DNA. So with the Native Americans, what they did was the markers, to the extent that it points to sort of exclusive, specific to Native Americans, that was colored purple. But for each individual tested, they had, they have um, sometimes mixed markers, markers from one population and markers that relate to another population. And what they found is that among Native Americans, they were seeing a fair amount of this blue type color, these markers that point to an ancestry that could be consistent with the Middle East or from Europe. And so when and you see much more of it in the northeastern Native American tribes. So, like with the Ojibwe, the Cree, the Chippewayan, you see there's much higher percentage of this blue of these markers that point to a potential Middle Eastern or European ancestry and not just an Asian ancestry. But what you also see is that for indigenous groups throughout the rest of the Americas, even for example with the Maya and so forth, they're also seeing some small percentages of this Middle Eastern or European DNA types. And so this was surprising. Now, what scientists have done, as they say, they routinely, generally dismiss these small results as saying, "Well, that must be due to recent admixture." Even if the uh, even if the people tested insist on a pure native ancestry, they say there must have been some mixture, and that's what's being captured there. However, there was a recent study in 2018, and in this study, they did a large-scale study of Native Americans, and this was focusing in particular in Central and South America. And what they found was a surprisingly high level of Jewish and Mediterranean DNA. Now, they were surprised by this, and they thought, okay, well, the Spanish, some Jews went to Spain. There's some Jewish ancestry among the Spanish that came over, but through the historical records, you have sort of estimates of like, okay, so how high of a percentage is that what you would expect to see? And what they found is that, as they said, that the percentages of Jewish DNA that they were finding did not match the typical historical explanation of that. Well, there just must be some Jewish people that were among the Spanish that came over. And as they said the estimates of Southeast Mediterranean ancestry represent values over and above those present in the Iberian individuals they examined. Our findings indicate that the Mediterranean ancestry among the Native Americans was much more prevalent than suggested by historical records. And this is the Chacon Duque peer-reviewed article there from 2018. So as you can tell, this is consistent with what you would expect from the Book of Mormon, and it kind of surprises scientists. Now, unfortunately, they refuse to consider the possibility of the existence of Jewish DNA among the Native Americans prior to Columbus. So when they ended up going back and they analyzed the DNA to supposedly estimate how many generations back the mixture occurred, they excluded all results that indicated mixture more than 30 generations ago. And so it deprives us of the opportunity to confirm, exactly what percentage of that Jewish or Southeast Mediterranean DNA can be traced prior to the time of Columbus. So anyway, so that's what we see from the autosomal DNA. I'll go ahead and stop sharing there. And in the book, like I said, I look at all the other DNA, the types of DNA evidence, and there's more evidence in the other types of testing. But in just taking a look at the autosomal DNA testing for here, let's summarize by asking questions. So, does the autosomal DNA testing support the Book of Mormon or not? And the answer is yes, it does. It does because it shows at least a portion of the ancestry of Native Americans that could relate to the Book of Mormon, in particular, a non-Eastern Asian type DNA that fits with a Middle Eastern partial ancestry for Native Americans. So it is consistent with the Book of Mormon. The second question, well, does the autosomal DNA testing say anything about geography of the Book of Mormon? And the answer to that is yes, it does also. So what does it show? It points out that the greater evidence is on the side of the Heartland geographic model. And the reason why is because of those greater percentages of the Hebrew, the Middle Eastern non-Asian or European type non-Asian DNA types. There's much higher concentrations in the eastern part of North America in those Algonquin tribes and those kind of remnants. So what that points to is the fact that those tribes in the Native American tribes, especially in the eastern North America, had higher percentages of ancestry potentially that could fit with Lehi and the Book of Mormon. But on the other hand, it is also consistent with the Mesoamerican model because, as you know, the Mesoamerican model looks and says that says that, well, it would have been a very small group that mixed within a larger population, so you shouldn't expect to see much in the way of DNA evidence. And that's also what the DNA evidence shows, meaning that it shows some some percentage, but it's a small percentage. And so that could be consistent with a small group mixing in Mesoamerica under the Mesoamerican geographic theory, or it could be consistent with instead a mixing that occurred later or at any time throughout the Americas. And that's my personal view, is that the geography is in the heartland of the eastern United States, and that what you have is a mixture that occurred throughout all of the Americas, such that you have a portion of Lehi's seed throughout the Americas, just in smaller percentages, and then you had a higher percentage of that kind of ancestry for the tribes that are in the eastern North America. So that's the way I see the evidence from the autosomal DNA. If you have comments or questions, feel free to put them in the comment section below. And I look forward to sharing in other videos more DNA evidence related to the Book of Mormon. Again, if you're interested in the content, please hit like and subscribe and for the notification button so that you can get the content and share with others. Thanks.